Today we are going to talk about psychology in the psycho-biblical perspective. Now, ano bang ibig sabihin ng psycho-biblical perspective? From the term itself, it's a compound word, psycho-biblical. We are understanding psychology by combining its principles with biblical principles. Marami tayong pwedeng matutunan about how the mind works in the scientific psychology when we understand it or when we combine it with things that we can find in the Bible. So yun yung ibig sabihin ng psycho-biblical perspective. In modern day science, hindi masyadong sikat yung perspective na yan because of the idea that science and religion should not combine, but later on we will discuss that. Pero slowly, as time goes by, scientists are realizing na marami rin pala tayong pwedeng matutunan from certain religious texts, especially the Bible, in trying to understand the human mind. Okay? So anyway, let's first talk about the definition of psychology. Okay? The root word of the word psychology is the word psyche, which basically means spirit, or this is the non-physical aspect of the person. So kapag sinabi mong psyche, hindi siya physical. It is a form of a spirit. In fact, if you study Greek mythology, Psyche is the goddess of the spirit. So when you combine that word psyche doon sa word na ology, basically ang ibig sabihin yan, psychology is the scientific study of the spirit or the scientific study of the non-physical aspect of the person. Kaya kapag psych major ka, ibig sabihin yan, magaling ka sa mga usapin na may kinalaman sa spirit. And true enough, in psychology, we talk about the non-physical components of the person, di ba? Pinag-uusapan natin yung personality, yung intelligence, yung resilience, those things that are non-physical. So in the original term, if you are a psychologist, then that means you need to be studying the spirit. Okay? Now, given that, meron na tayong kaagad pwedeng i-assume in the field of psychology. If you are studying psychology and you are a student of psychology, basically you agree to the idea that human beings have a spirit. Hindi kasi pwedeng psychologist ka na hindi ka naniniwalang merong spirit. So basically, psychology assumes that each person that we deal with, meron siyang spirit sa loob. Diba? So, ano bang itsura ng spirit? Again, tulad ng sinabi ko kanina, this is something non-physical. But if you go to Google and you type the word spirit, hanap ka ng mga pictures na related sa spirit, usually it is portrayed as a bright light. So para na lang mas ma-concretize natin yung idea ng spirit, just think that each person has a bright light inside their body. So lahat tayo, meron tayong spirit, meron tayong bright light na yan within our bodies. Now, a more deeper question is, saan ba nanggaling yung spirit na yan? Where did that bright light came from? Diba? Siyempre, kung merong spirit yung mga tao, we need to ask where did that come from? Well, the creator of the spirit is a spirit himself. John 4:24, God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and in truth. Huwag na muna natin pag-usapan yung ibig sabihin ng, anong ibig sabihin ng to worship Him in spirit and in truth, but basically, the creator of the spirit is a spirit himself. That's his nature. Spirito siya. So yung spirit na spirit na meron tayo, ginawa yan ng spirit din. Okay? So basically that's what I want you to get here. The creator of the spirit is a spirit himself. Now, how did that spirit, yung creator, paano ba niya ginawa yung spirit na meron tayo? Well, let's go back to Genesis. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. Anong ibig sabihin when God created man in His own image? Ibig sabihin no, number one, nagkaroon tayo ng spirit because the Creator is a spirit himself. That's the first one. What does it mean when we are created in His own image? We spiritually inherited that spirit that God has. Second, ibig sabihin ng to be created in His own image, we were able to get certain attributes that God also has. Don't get me wrong, hindi natin sinasabi na lahat ng meron ang Diyos, meron ang tao, but we got a little piece of those attributes that God has. For example, intelligence. Ang Diyos merong intelligence, ang creation niya meron ding intelligence. Ang Diyos merong personality, so yung creation niya meron ding personality. So we got a little bit of those attributes na meron yung Diyos. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Again, yung breath of life na yan, diyan nanggaling yung spirit na meron tayo. That's how the Creator shared certain attributes that He has to His creation. Breathed into His nostrils the breath of life. So yung breath of life na yan refers to the spirit that is inside our body. Okay? So doon nanggaling yung spirit na pinag-aaralan natin in psychology. Now, let's zoom into that spirit that we are talking about. Ano ba yung mga different components of that spirit? Ano ba yung mga smaller parts of that spirit? Kumbaga parang cellphone, di ba? Yung cellphone natin, meron siyang mga smaller parts or different components. We have the power button, the volume up button, the volume down button, the silent switch right here. We have the screen, we have the camera, we have the light, so on and so forth. Ano ba yung different components nung spirit natin? Okay? Actually, again, to answer that question, there are certain biblical passages that will give us an idea kung ano ba itong mga smaller components of our spirit that we have. Mark 12:30-31. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than this. Again, huwag na muna natin pag-usapan kung ano yung interpretation ng Mark 12:30-31, but rather, I would like you to focus on those words with yellow arrows. Those words na katabi ng mga yellow arrows, these are the different components of the spirit that we have as persons. Diba? Kasi sa Mark 12:30-31, ang nagsasalita dito si Jesus. And Jesus was trying to make us do something. And that is how? To love the Lord your God. But take note, Jesus was very specific in how we need to love our God. Very specific siya. And how was He specific? He mentioned the different components of our spirit. Yun na nga yung 5 arrow na nakikita nyo ngayon, the heart, soul, mind, strength, neighbor. So zoom into that spirit. Jesus specifically mentioned the different components of our spirit. Meron tayong strength, meron tayong mind, heart, social, and soul. So let's go to each one of this and briefly discuss kung ano ba yung mga functions ng mga components na ito ng ating spirit. Let's first talk about strength. Yung strength, this is the energy that comes out from our body. So the key word here is energy. Lahat ng katawan ng tao, 'di ba? Meron yang energy na nire-release. And that energy, ang pinaka-function niyan is it enables movement, paggalaw. So lahat ng tao gumagalaw, 'di ba? I mean, every day you wake up in the morning, you go out on the streets, you see people moving, they walk, they run, they talk, 'di ba? So yung movement na yon na nakikita natin, nanggagaling yun sa energy na nare-release na sa katawan ng tao. But the question is, where is that energy coming from? The source of that energy is something that is very material. And I know a lot of you are familiar with this material thing that is the source of that energy. Yan yung tinatawag nating pagkain. Diba? Food is created for energy. Again, we can see this in the book of Genesis. God blessed them, referring to Adam and Eve, and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food." Now you have to look at verse 28 and 29 as two connected passages. In verse 28, maraming pinapagawa yung creator of the spirit. Kung bibilangin mo, be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the animals. There are 5 things that God, the creator of the spirit, wants the man to do. The thing is, para magawa mo yung 5 na pinapagawa ng creator, do you agree you need a lot of movement here? Diba? For you to be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over it, kinakailangan mong gumalaw ng gumalaw. And so in verse 29, God gave man the very thing that he needs para makagalaw. And that is none other than food. Kaya nga sinabi niya na doon sa verse 29 na magagawa mo yung mga inuutos ko in verse 28 if you use food as a source of your energy. Although hindi naman directly sinabi, but implicitly, that's what it means. Kaya nagbigay yung creator of the spirit ng pagkain is for the creation, is to enable the creation para magawa kung ano yung sinabi niyang dapat gawin. And you know what? This is very connected to what Abraham Maslow in his hierarchy of needs, right? In the hierarchy of needs, kung mapapansin ninyo, yung pinaka-base ng pyramid na sinasabi ni Maslow is called the physiological needs. This is where everything starts, right? Theories of personality. You cannot go to the higher levels of the hierarchy kapag hindi mo na-satisfy yung pinaka-basic needs, the physiological needs. Why? Because the physiological needs will enable you to move. And one of those things that you get in physiological needs would be food, air, water, so on and so forth. Hindi ka makakagalaw to get your safety needs, love and belongingness, esteem, self-actualization kung walang enerhiya na nakukuha galing sa food na kinakain natin in the physiological needs. So here, you can see that what the Bible is saying is very in line with a scientific theory that we believe to be true in the field of psychology, in the field of scientific psychology. And just to add, alam nyo ba, that in the book of Genesis, the food as a source of energy, this principle is also applied among animals. Kasi ang mga hayop naman din gumagalaw, 'di ba? The creator of the spirit also enabled animals to move for certain purposes. 'Di ba? Later on for animals to help us do what we need to do, to be pets or whatever, to balance nature, animals also need to move. And guess what? The creator of the spirit also gave food to the animals para makagalaw din yung mga animals just like people. Verse 30, "And to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds in the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." Again, bakit binigyan o bakit gumawa ng ang creator ng source of food in verse 30? For the animals to be able to eat this food and be a source of energy for them to be able to move. So, yun yung ibig sabihin ng strength as a component of the mind. No? This is the energy that our body release to enable movement. And let me just add one more bullet under strength. Papasok din dito yung mga physical sensations that we feel. That will also be under the strength component of the spirit. Okay? So kasama na dyan yung kapag naiinitan ka, kapag nalalamigan ka, kapag nasasarapan ka, or kapag tinatamad yung katawan mo, lahat ito is also referring to that strength component of our spirit. In fact, the first evil movement came from a physical sensation. Yung unang paggalaw ng tao that led man to its fall, may kinalaman yan sa physical sensation eh. Diba? So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and it was delight to the eyes, this was the time when the serpent was tempting Eve to eat the fruit. Diba? Yung unang napansin dito ni Eve is yung physical beauty ng food. Nasarapan siyang tignan. Delight to the eyes. And because she felt that the fruit was a delight to the eyes, naging malaking factor yon para hindi niya sundin yung sinabi ng creator of the spirit not to eat that fruit. But what enabled her, what led her to do that? It is a physical sensation. So under yan ng strength component of the spirit. Now, let's move on to the mind. Ano naman ibig sabihin ng mind as a component of the spirit? This refers to the mental energy that people have, the intellect, or the wisdom na meron tayo. Again, hindi natin mapagkakaila that humans are smart compared to animals, compared to any other living creature on the face of the earth. Talaga naman nangingibabaw ang tao when it comes to the intellect. Right? Saan ba natin nakuha yung intellect na yan? Again, going back to that principle na sinabi ko kanina, we spiritually inherited that level of intellect from the creator of the spirit because the spirit, God himself is an intellectual being. Meron siyang talino. Isaiah, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. Look at that. His understanding no one can fathom. Ibig sabihin, sobrang taas ng talino ng creator of the spirit who is God. Meron siyang understanding. And if we are going to compare his level of understanding to our level of understanding, hindi daw natin maiintindihan. Kasi sobrang advanced yung kanyang intellectual level compared to us. But He created us in His own image. Sinabi natin yan. What does that mean? He gave us a little part of that intellect that He has. Kaya tayo naging rational people. We got that rationality from an intellectual creator who created us. Again, it doesn't mean that we are as smart as God, but God gave us a little bit of that intelligence that He has to help us, people here on earth, to function well. In another passage in Isaiah, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Hindi pareho ng level ng intellect yung meron sa tao versus yung meron sa Creator. The Creator has a very way higher intellect compared to the intellectual level that human beings like us have. Pero yun na nga, we got a little bit of that intelligence that God has. Now, what is the purpose of this intellect that we have? Bakit ba tayo binigyan ng Creator ng certain degree of intellect? Well, He gave us that intellect for us makagawa ng problem-solving task and to express our creativity. That's the main purpose of the mind. We use our mind, we use our intellect to make our life comfortable here on earth through solving problems and expressing our creativity. Diba? In fact, going back again to the book of Genesis, ang sabi dito, diba, yung 5 iniutos ng Diyos, be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the animals. Do you agree? For you to be able to do those 5 things, hindi lang pagkain ang kailangan mo, kinakailangan mo rin mag-isip. So habang gumagalaw ka para magawa mo yung sinasabing gawin mo, dito in verse 28, you also need smarts. You also need to think. That's why the creator of the spirit gave people a little bit of that intellect. In fact, in the book of Genesis, again, a little bit of a trivia, dito natin makikita yung first intellectual activity na ginawa ng tao. In chapter 2, verses 19 to 20, "Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky." And then anong ginawa niya? He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. Diba? This is a very clear intellectual activity. Gumagamit ng pag-iisip, gumagamit dito ng intelligence si Adam. Para mag-isip ka ng pangalan ng isang animal, gagamit ka talaga ng intelligence dyan eh. Gagamit ka ng intellect dyan. Dapat maintindihan mo yung different sound patterns. Siguro dapat maintindihan mo yung alphabet during those time. Hindi ko alam kung anong klaseng alphabet yung ginagamit ni Adam, pero meron yan. Kinakailangan din gumamit ka ng memory dito. Right? In what way? Sisiguraduhin mo na yung pangalan na binigay mo sa isang animal, hindi na siya uulit sa isa pang animal. So, that is a use of your memory, which is again, an intellectual activity. Alright? Actually, ito pa, idagdag ko lang, no? In Genesis chapter 3, verses 4 to 5, dito naman natin makikita yung first intellectual ambition. So, in Genesis chapter 2, the first intellectual activity, dito unang ginamit ng tao yung kanyang talino. Dito naman sa Genesis chapter 3, leading to the fall of man, makikita natin yung kagustuhan ng tao na pataasin pa yung kanyang intellect, yung kanyang intellectual ambition to upgrade intelligence, right? You remember this part. "But the serpent said to the woman," this is the time where the serpent is tempting the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Yan yung ginamit ng serpent na pang-tempt kay Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. Ano yung pinangako niya? You eat the fruit and your intellect will improve. Your eyes will be opened. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. Paraphrase mo, mas tatalino ka. And that's one of the reasons why Eve ate the forbidden fruit. Diba? The fact na kinain niya yung forbidden fruit, after the serpent said this, it tells us that man, meron talaga siyang innate desire to improve intellect. Mas gusto niyang tumalino. Mas gusto niyang i-upgrade yung talino niya. And that ambition to improve the intellect led to the fall of man. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and it was delight to the eyes, and the tree was to be desired to make one wise. So again, merong desire ang tao na talagang i-increase yung kanyang intellect. Diba? Yun yung isa sa mga nagtulak sa kanya to disobey what God told him not to do. Alright? Or in this case, told her not to do. Okay? Now, in psychology, nasaan natin makikita yung intellect? Again, we need to talk about a theory in psychology. Ito yung tinatawag nating self-determination theory. Hindi ko na nailagay dito. But basically, that theory explains human motivation. How people become motivated. People become motivated when they are able to satisfy 3 needs that we need to get in life. Autonomy, competence, and relatedness. I would like to focus on competence. Ang tao, nag-i-increase yung motivation natin kapag alam natin that we are going to do something where we can express our competence. 'Di ba? At parte ng competence, yung parte ng galing natin, kasi sa Tagalog, yung competence galing yan 'di ba? So, mas namomotivate tayo kapag nasa-sense natin na magaling tayo sa isang bagay na ginagawa natin, or namomotivate tayo kapag alam natin that by doing something, it will increase our competence. And part of that competence that this theory is talking about is intellectual competence. Ang mga tao meron talagang intellectual needs. We have that innate desire to sense that we are improving intellectually. Diba? Kailangan natin yan. This is one of the things that will make our psyche alive. Kapag nasa-sense ng psyche natin that we are improving intellectually. That's why if you study history, makikita natin yan, for example, during the Renaissance. 'Di ba? Ako naniniwala na yung Renaissance na yan, kaya yan nag-start, it's because of the intellectual hunger that people had during that time. Before the Renaissance kasi, ang parte lang ng spirit ng tao that is being enhanced is the soul. Diba? Kasi before the Renaissance, that was the age of the church. Almost everything that we believe about the world, almost everything that we think about the world, laging may kinalaman yan sa religion. Laging may kinalaman yan kay God. So, overnourished na yung soul ng mga tao before the Renaissance that their intellect, their mind, was parang napabayaan. Napabayaan, was neglected. And so, dumating sa point na sobrang neglect na nung mind ng tao that people began finding ways on how to further nurture the need of the intellect. So, kinakailangan na nilang mag-isip para sa kanilang mga sarili. Hindi na tama na raw yung pag-iisip ng mga bagay tungkol sa Bible because the soul is already overnourished. Let's now nourish that part of ourselves that is called our intellect. Kaya doon na nagsimula yung Renaissance. People began studying things outside the Bible, outside God, outside the church to satisfy the intellectual need na matagal na nilang hindi nakukuha. And fast forward, yung Renaissance na yan, dyan din nagsimula, yan din yung naging springboard para ang tao gumawa ng science. 'Di ba? So yung science na yan, yung field of science is the product of people's intellectual adventure. 'Di ba? Intellectual binging. Ang dami-dami nang natutunan ng tao, ang dami-dami na niyang pagkain na naibigay sa kanyang intellectual component of the spirit that they were able to create the field of science. Alright, so again, that's a very important component of the spirit, our intellect. Now, let's move on to the component of the heart. Ano naman to? Heart, basically, ito yung component ng ating spirit na nakaka-experience ng emotions or certain feelings. Happiness, anger, sadness, frustration, lahat ng nararamdaman mo as a person, it is being felt by that heart, by that emotional component of your spirit. Biblically speaking, ang tawag kasi dyan is heart, di ba? Anyway, one of the things that I would like you to realize here, given that idea about the heart, is that God, the Spirit who created our spirit, God does feel. Sa Tagalog, hindi siya manhid. A lot of people kasi, ang picture nila kay God, ang picture nila sa creator of the spirit, manhid. Walang nararamdaman, walang pakialam sa kanyang mga creation. That is basically inaccurate. Because one of the attributes that God has is that He is a God who feels. Meron din siyang emotions. Diba? If you read the entire Bible, ang dami-dami mga emotions na naramdaman ng Diyos. Nagalit siya, natuwa siya, naiinis din siya, natutuwa rin siya, so on and so forth. So God is not emotionless, but He is also an emotional God. Right? In fact, again, going back to the book of Genesis, isa sa mga unang emotions that God expressed was satisfaction. God looked at everything He had made, and He was very pleased. He was very pleased. That is an emotion. So, His capability of feeling emotions, pinasa din niya yan sa kanyang mga creation, okay, sa kanyang mga creation, when He created man in His own image. Kaya tayo nakakaramdam, kaya tayo may mga emotions na nararamdaman, namana natin yan sa creator ng spirit. Because the spirit is an emotional being. So, and when we were created in His own image, therefore, naging rin tayo, naging capable din tayo in feeling these emotions. Proverbs 15:13. A cheerful heart brings a smile to your face. A sad heart makes it hard to grieve through the day. So we are capable of feeling cheerful. We are capable of feeling sadness just like the creator of the spirit. Diba? In fact, going back again to the book of Genesis, one of the first emotional expressions na makikita natin was in Genesis chapter 2 verse 23. Isa ito sa mga unang way or unang episode, unang expression ng emotion in the history of humankind when Adam saw for the first time Eve. You know the story, 'di ba? Yung gumawa si God ng babae habang tulog si Adam, and when Adam woke up, he saw Eve. Anong sabi ni Adam dito? This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Now, many people miss this point. How do you think Adam was saying these words? Ang mahirap kasi kapag text lang yung binabasa natin, hindi natin alam yung emotions na nararamdaman nung taong nagsasalita in the text until we read between the lines. I believe that Adam, while he was saying these words, he was very emotional. Sobrang in love niya kay Eve. Sobrang nagagandahan siya kay Eve. Kaya nga yung words niya dito ang lalalim. Bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. You are part of me. Ang ganda-ganda mo. Mahal na mahal kita. Okay? Ganun yung level of emotion that Adam was feeling here. Again, let's not miss the point. Why is Adam able to feel that emotion? Because we spiritually inherited that capability from the creator of the spirit. That creator of the spirit is also an emotional being. One more thing about the heart component of the spirit, we need to understand that this is a very powerful driver of human action. Maraming ginagawa ang tao, everyday behaviors. Ang nagpapagalaw sa mga behaviors na yon is none other than the emotions that we feel. And this is very much in line with clinical psychology. Diba? One of the things that clinical psychologists really accept is the idea that our behavior, most of our behaviors are driven by our emotions, by our feelings. Diba? Maraming taong nakapatay dahil sa galit. Maraming tao nag-suicide dahil sa sobrang lungkot. Feelings is a very powerful motivator of human actions. That's why one way to understand, diba, in clinical psychology, one way to understand why people do what they do, it has something to do with their emotional life. We saw this in the book of Genesis, right? After Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, what happened? Then the eyes of both of them were opened and they realized they were naked. Now, Bible experts say that when they realized they were naked, meron silang emotion na naramdaman. Hindi lang naman basta na-realize nila, ay, nakahubad tayo eh. After they realized that they were naked, they felt something. They felt something. And what could be that emotion that they felt after they realized that they were naked? Shame. Nagkaroon na sila ng shame. Nagkaroon na sila ng mali sa isa't isa. That's why, tingnan nyo dito, no? Ano ang nangyaring action? What behavior resulted to that shame? So, gumawa sila ng coverings for themselves. Nahiya na sila sa isa't isa kasi nakahubad sila, so they created coverings for themselves. Emotions, very powerful driver of human actions. Another example of this, doon sa Genesis chapter 4 between Cain and Abel, right? Cain, bakit ba niya napatay si Abel? Out of emotion. Dito pa lang kinausap ng Diyos si Cain. Why are you angry and why has your face fallen? Diba? Kasi nakita ni Cain na mas napiplease si God doon sa sacrifice ni Abel kumpara sa sacrifice niya. And that situation made him angry. He felt an emotion. And so that emotion later on pushed him, influenced him to do something that is not good. Verse 4, chapter 4, verse 8. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. Pinatay niya si Abel. And that behavior, again, was driven by the strong anger that Cain felt towards his brother. So again, as you can see, 'di ba, yung basic idea ng clinical psychology that feelings influence behaviors, it is seen many times in the different parts of the Bible. Let's move on to the social dimension of the spirit. Ano ba itong social dimension of the spirit? This is the dimension of the spirit that needs connection with another human being. Take note, kinakailangan yung i-connect mo yung sarili mo sa isang tao rin. 'Di ba? The Lord God Himself said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a suitable helper for him." 'Di ba madalas itong ginagamit na trivia ng mga Bible scholars? Ano ang unang problema na nakita ng Diyos sa tao? It is not good for a man to be alone. Kumbaga yan yung isa sa unang limitations that was mentioned in the Bible in terms of human nature. We were not created to be alone. It is not good for us to be alone. Sino nagsabi niyan? The Creator of the Spirit. Yung Creator na mismo nagsabi, when it comes to the human spirit, we are not meant to be alone. We need to be connected with other people. Right? In fact, let me just shortly explain chapter 2 verse 20 para maipakita sa inyo na talagang nasa nature natin ang kumonek sa ibang tao. Look at what it says in 2:20. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. I would like you to notice the word found. Kapag merong word na found, ibig sabihin merong search. Tama? No suitable helper was found. Ibig sabihin, in that line, no suitable helper was found, merong constant attempt to connect with someone. Now, honestly, I don't know who is doing that search for connecting to someone. Is it God doing the search for Adam, or is it Adam doing the search for himself? Pero ang isang malinaw dito, merong constant search. Kumbaga, kaya nga yan yung picture ko sa slide, di ba? Parang yung cellphone natin, lagi itong naghahanap ng network where it can connect. Constantly searching for available networks. Ganun din sa human spirit. Our human spirit is in constant search for that someone that we can connect with. Because again, the design of the spirit is for it to be connected to another spirit. At syempre, yung spirit na yon na talagang tamang connection for our spirit is a spirit of another human being. And again, in the field of psychology, maraming beses nang naipakita yan. For example, in this study, di ba? People with healthy relationships have good psychological well-being. Isa yan sa mga pinakamalalakas na findings in the field of psychology. Mahirap i-refute yan. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na may mga tao talaga dinisenyo para walang makasama sa buhay. No. This is very universal. As long as you are a person and you have a spirit, that spirit is meant to be connected with another human spirit. In fact, hindi ko na lang din nailagay dito, but we remember what Abraham Maslow said. Going back to his hierarchy of needs, di ba? One of the needs that we have is love and belongingness. After you secure your food, after you secure your shelter, now it's time for you to search for someone to connect with. Whether that's a parent, a special someone, group of friends, lagi mo kinakailangan ng isa pang spirit to connect with. Again, this is a very strong evidence that what the Bible is saying is very much in line with what scientific psychology is telling us. Diba? Sabi nga ni Solomon in Ecclesiastes Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Every time I read this passage, alam nyo, talagang very, very connected sa mga nakikita in scientific studies. Things are not going well for people who separate their spirits from the spirits of other people. We always need someone to connect with. We are not meant to be alone. We are meant to be connected with the companion of other people. Diba? And again, no, itong sa book of Ecclesiastes, this is true. Two are better than one. This is true when it comes to stress. Diba? Studies after studies are showing that our stress becomes more manageable when we sense that we are not alone while experiencing the stress. Ganun din sa depression. Mas hindi tumitindi yung depression kapag meron tayong social support. Ganun din sa physical illness. Mas mabilis ang recovery when we sense that people around us are caring for us. Our spirit is not meant to be alone. Now, let's move on to the soul component of the spirit. Diba? A lot of people are interchanging those terms, no, soul and spirit. Although ang pagkakapareho nila is they are both non-physical, pero yung difference nila is that the soul is a component of the spirit. And this component refers to our spiritual needs, or in a more scientific term, ito yung tinatawag nating spirituality. This is the part of our spirit that constantly seek connection with God. In the previous component, yung social component, di ba? We are constantly searching for companionship of other human beings. Pero itong soul, ang kakaiba dito is this time, we are seeking companionship. We are seeking connection with a higher being. Hindi na tao ang hinahanap mo dito. There is a certain part of your spirit that constantly wants to connect with the higher being who is none other than its creator. Diba? The spiritual being who created your spirit, also known as God. Merong ganong need yung tao. Meron siyang need to always want to connect with that higher being. In fact, we can see this in history. Human beings' need to connect to a higher being can be reflected on the idea that the behavior of worshiping a higher being, is universal. Kaya nga tignan nyo, no, yung religion, hindi mawala-wala yan sa buhay ng tao eh. Because religion is a bridge for us to satisfy our spiritual needs. I need someone higher than me. I need to connect to someone higher than me. I need to talk to someone who is higher than me. Yes, it helps if I talk to people I know. Meron kang social needs, pero meron ka ring spiritual needs. I need to sense that I am with a person who is higher and more powerful than me. After all, yung creator ng spirit is a spirit himself. So, hindi talaga maiiwasan na as our nature, since we are spiritual beings, hahanap-hanapin natin yung spiritual creator who created us in the first place. So, you study culture, you study history, all throughout the history, people were always searching for someone to worship. The list goes on. Siyempre, number one dyan, God. Diba? People also worship nature. People worship the sun. People worship their ancestors. People worship different elements. Right? Pero saan nanggagaling yung desire na yon to worship a higher being? Again, to the idea that we have a soul component of our spirit. Meron tayong desire to always search for our creator. In fact, there was this one scholar, ang ganda nung sinabi niya, no, another evidence na totoo ito. When you compare animals with human beings, hindi ka makakita ng aso na nagwo-worship. There is no animal in the entire world na gusto nilang kumonect sa higher being. Wala ka pang makikitang pusa na kumakanta or pusa na nagpe-pray o mga daga na nagwo-worship sa higher being. No. Because when we talk about animals, wala silang soul component just like we have. 'Di ba? Yun yung pinagkaiba ng tao sa animals, no? Tayo, meron tayong soul component. God breathed on us His Spirit. He did not do that with animals. And so as a result, meron tayong soul component, animals don't. So, we are capable of worshiping a higher being and animals cannot. Okay? So again, you go all over the world, you go around the world, religion is universal. Almost all people in different cultures have asked the following questions. What is life all about? Why am I here? What is right and what is wrong? Where am I going after I physically die? Ito yung mga tanong talaga na all throughout the history of human beings, laging tinatanong yan. Where are these questions coming from? Definitely, these are not intellectual questions. These are soul questions. That part of us, called our soul, is searching for answers to these questions. And in Christianity, of course, the best way to answer the questions of the soul, the best way to satisfy the needs of the soul is by meditating, is by reading the word of the creator of the soul. Diba? That's the only way that we can satisfy the needs of our soul. Diba? Food for our soul are the words that was said to us by the creator of our soul through the Bible. Let me just add. Our soul component, may isa pa pala siyang function, no? Other than it's seeking connection with the higher being, this is also the component of the spirit that enables us to determine what's right and what's wrong. The thing is, isa sa mga nature ng creator of the spirit who is God, one of his attributes, he is a moral God. When you say that God is a moral God, nasa nature niya na merong tama at mali. Di ba? Sa nature niya talaga, nasa nature niya na merong mga bagay na tama, merong mga bagay na mali because He is a moral God. And where can we see that? Have you asked that question in Genesis 2:17? But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat thereof, you shall surely die. Very common question to, no? Lalo na ng mga bata when they hear this in Sunday schools. When God created the Garden of Eden, bakit pa niya ginawa yung tree of the knowledge of good and evil? In the first place, kung gumawa na lang siya ng garden nang walang ganitong puno, the serpent cannot tempt Adam and Eve on anything. Kasi wala naman pinagbawal yung Diyos in that version of the garden kung walang knowledge of the tree of good and evil, di ba? Bakit pa ginawa ng Diyos yung puno na yan? Nagkasala patuloy yung tao. The answer is, because again, it is God's nature to identify right from wrong. Nasa nature niya, nasa constant awareness niya na merong mga bagay na tama at mali. So He needed to create the tree to reflect His attribute that there is something that is right and there are some things that are wrong. Kaya niya ginawa yung tree na yan. It reflected His nature of being a moral God. Right things and wrong things matter for Him. So sana nakuha niyo yung idea na yun. No? Kaya niya ginawa yung puno na yan. It reflects His morality as a God. That tree reflects His moralness. Na sa reality, merong tama at merong mali. And so in that setting, in the Garden of Eden, where everything was perfect, merong tama at mali doon. Ano yung tamang gawin? Lahat tamang gawin. Except for ano yung maling gawin? Kainin yung fruit of that tree. It is a reflection that God is a moral God. What's right and what's wrong matters to Him. Martin Luther King once said, "Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men." Napaka-accurate ng picture dito ng human spirit ni Martin Luther King, no? So sobrang talino na ng tao. Yun na yung tinatawag nating scientific power, no? Masyado na tayong intellectual. We have forgotten that we still have a soul dimension of the spirit. Humihina na tuloy yung sense natin of what is right and what is wrong. Sounds familiar? 'Di ba? Unti-unti habang nag-a-advance yung science, marami mga tao naniniwala truth is relative, that morality is relative. What's right for you might be wrong for me. What's wrong for me might be right for you, and that's fine. Let's just respect each other's ideas. But you know what? That's not our nature as spiritual beings. We are innately designed. We are innately programmed to identify right behaviors from wrong behaviors. Martin Luther King here was very accurate. We have guided missiles and misguided men. Masyado na tayong napapadala sa ating intellect, sa ating emotions, that we forgot to enhance our soul dimension. Hindi na natin in-exercise yung ability natin to identify what's right and what's wrong. In fact, we went as far as saying that there's no such thing as right. There's no such thing as wrong. Guess what? That's not our nature. We were not created to think that way about morality. Actually, napatunayan na ito in the field of developmental psychology. There was a study done by Wynn and Bloom, 2013. Guess what? Babies as young as 1 month, as young as 1 year old, hanggang 2 years old, wala pa sila masyadong mga cultural experiences, but did you know, in the study by Wynn and Bloom, they have the ability to determine what's right and what's wrong without teaching them morality. Hindi ko na masyadong i-emphasize yung nangyari sa study, but basically, as you can see on the picture, there are 2 puppets, the green and the orange. One of these puppets did something that is good, and one of the puppets did something that is bad, while babies are watching. Diba? So, yung mga baby, yung mga bata, nanonood sila ng mga ginagawa ng puppet, yung isa gumawa ng masama, yung isa gumawa ng mabuti. After that reenactment of what's good and what's bad, these babies were shown the 2 puppets. And guess what? According to the study, what they found out, babies always prefer the puppet who did the good thing. Mas nilaro nila yung puppet na mabait, mas tinitignan nila yung puppet na mabait, mas ayaw nila, mas negative yung emotion nila towards that puppet who did something bad during the reenactment. Question: why did they know that the good puppet did a good behavior and the bad puppet did a bad behavior? No one taught them that. But it seems like by nature, they can sense that what this puppet did was right and what that puppet did was wrong. Meron silang innate compass. Meron silang innate barometer to say that a behavior is right and the behavior is wrong. Where did these babies get that? From the creator of the soul. He is a moral being. And just like him, human beings like us, we also have that ability, that willingness, that desire to differentiate what's right and what's wrong. In fact, another strong evidence of this is the universality of law, mga batas. 'Di ba? Bakit ba lahat ng society sa buong mundo may batas? Wala akong alam na society na walang batas, anything goes. Because again, it reflects our nature that the rightness and the wrongness of a behavior matters to us. And to make sure that we will do what is right, and we will not do what is wrong, gumagawa tayo ng iba't ibang mga batas. Doon nang galing yan. Because the creator of the spirit is a moral being himself. Now, the thing is, I'm still talking about the soul component, okay? The soul component of the spirit. When you enhance your soul, kapag nabibigay mo yung mga needs ng soul mo, the overall outcome sa ating spirit nagiging maganda. 'Di ba? Kaya nga, one of the conclusions na sinasabi ng mga psychologists about this is spirituality is good for the psyche. Spirituality is good for the psyche. You read the literature on the psychology of spirituality. When people enhance their spirituality, good things happen to them. As in, wala pa akong nabasang study na in-enhance niya yung spirituality niya, tapos lumala yung kanyang psyche. Almost everything that happens to the person, when he or she enhance their spirituality, very positive. Lower stress, mas nagiging masaya siya sa buhay, mas nagiging maayos yung relationship niya with other people, na-overcome nila yung mga addictions nila when they satisfy the needs of the soul. And you know what? Every time I read these studies, I remember what Jesus said in John 15:5. Anong sabi niya? I am the vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. I would like you to focus on that word, apart from me. Diba? Ibig sabihin, Jesus here was referring to how near your soul is to the source. The spiritual being who created your soul expects your soul to be always near its creator. And the status of your psyche depends on how near or how far you are from the source or from the creator who created you. Diba? If you want to be more specific, in Galatians, sinabi yan eh. Ano ba yung mga magagandang nangyayari when the soul is near its source? The fruit of the Spirit is what? Yung spirit mo, yung overall spirit mo, nagbubunga. And what are those fruits that you experience because you are near the source, you are near the creator of the spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Scientific psychology agree with this. People who value their spirituality, all the good things happen to them. Children become happier. They are able to overcome their experience of abuses from their past. People learn to forgive. People have better relationships with other people. They are able to overcome their addictions. Halos lahat ng bagay na magaganda nangyayari when people enhance their soul. Because again, we are designed to be that way. Our soul must be connected, in constant connection with the creator of the soul who is God. Diba? Ito yung analogy ko dyan, no? Yung cellphone mo, basically useless yan kapag lobat. Diba? Ganyan yung mga phones, diba? Kapag lobat, meron kang mga function na hindi mo na magagamit. You can no longer use your flashlight. You can no longer surf the net. Why? Because its battery is low. Because the battery is far from its source of power. But what happens is, when you connect that phone again to the source of its power, everything becomes functional again. Tama? Nagiging functional ulit yung phone kasi nakakakuha na siya ng power from the source. The same thing with our soul. The more we are near to the source of energy of our soul, who is the creator of the soul, who is God, the nearer we are to God, the nearer our soul is in the presence of God, mas nagiging functional yung overall spirit natin. Not only the soul, ha? Pero lahat ng sinabi ko kanina, no, na iba pang mga components, they also experience enhancement when we are near the creator of our soul. Alright? So in summary, in this video, ito yung ginawa natin. Sinamarize natin yung iba't ibang mga components of the spirit that we have. Psychology is the scientific study of the spirit. And what are the different components of the spirit that we are studying in psychology? Strength, mind, heart, social, and the soul. Okay, so sa mga next na mga videos na ilalabas natin, we are going to talk about each one of these separately, and we are also going to discuss how these different components may relate to each other. But before we end this video, ano ba yung mga big lessons that we need to learn from this anatomy of the spirit? Ano ngayon? Ano ngayon kung yung spirit natin ganyan yung itsura? What are the things that we can learn? Number one, I hope you learned that the Bible's view of the spirit is in line with scientific evidences. Sorry, typo lang yan. The Bible's view of the spirit, okay, typo lang, na doble ko lang. But the Bible's view of the spirit is in line with scientific evidences. I mean, there are a lot of passages in the Bible that agrees with what psychology has to say, what biology has to say, what anthropology has to say, and all the other fields. Maraming mga overlaps, maraming mga tugma. Yung sinasabi ng Biblia sa sinasabi ng mga fields na tulad nito. And I find that very amazing, especially as a psychologist. I mean, psychology and the Bible, nauna ang Bible. Diba? And all those things that psychology is discovering right now about how the psyche works, alam na ng Bible hundreds of years before scientific psychology. And I find that amazing kasi during the time of the Bible, wala pa tayong sophisticated methods of studying the psyche. Wala pa tayong statistical method, wala pa tayong mga MRI, wala pa tayong mga research methods, but the Bible already has an accurate view of the psyche that we are studying in the field of psychology, which leads us to number 2. The Bible must be a legitimate source of knowledge in psychology. I think diniscuss ko na rin ito sa isa ko pang video, hanapin nyo na lang sa channel, no? But we need to give more respect to the Bible when it comes to its authority in understanding the human psyche. Yung mga psychologists na nakikinig, hindi dapat natin kino-consider na parang tabu yung biblical ideas in the field of psychology, because there are a lot of biblical ideas very compatible with what scientific psychology is saying. Marami ng mga research questions, yung sagot ng research question in line with what the Bible is saying. So the Bible must be a legitimate source of knowledge in psychology. Kung ikaw ay isang psikolohista, it would help you in a very big way to have a more accurate picture of the human psyche when you study what the Bible is saying about the human psyche. And number 3, dito, very general na to, no? I hope in this video you realize that science, specifically psychology, and the Bible are not rivals. Kasi parang sa ngayon, yan yung popular idea, no, na ang science at Bible magkaaway yan. 'Di ba? Sa scientific times ngayon, hindi na tayo dapat nakikinig sa Bible kasi ang Bible old school. I beg to disagree. They are not rivals. In fact, they confirm each other. I believe that God did not only create the Bible, but God also enabled science to prosper here on earth. Why? Because science will further make us realize on the existence of God. Hindi sila dapat pinapagsabong, hindi sila dapat pinapag-away because they confirm each other. Sabi nga ni Galileo Galilei, a scientist himself, the prohibition of science would be contrary to the Bible. which in hundreds of places teaches us how the greatness and the glory of God shine forth marvelously in all His works, and to be read above all in the open book of the heavens. Everything that you see in science, the heavens, the ocean, the animal kingdom, especially in psychology, how the psyche works, these are all strong testimonies that there is a God that created all these things. Ang ganda nung sinabi ni Galileo dito, no? That the heavens is the open book for people to realize that there is God who created everything. And I really hope that future psychologists will adapt that model. That the human psyche that we are studying here in psychology, isa itong produkto, isa itong creation ng isang spiritual being who is capable of creating spirits. Spirits that we study in our field. So sana meron kayong natutunan in this lecture video on the psycho-biblical perspective. Until next time, thank you for listening and God bless.